Oh, hopefully everybody can hear me now. Let's see here. Okay, good. I think that's working correctly now. For some reason, it started muting itself in the beginning. Anyhow, welcome out to tonight's coaches call for all of the members, the coaching members of Tax Sale Support. We love having you guys join us for the coaches call each week, and really, we've got a ton of stuff we'd like to be able to cover tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I think we may have Michael here. I'll have to see here if Michael hops on. He will be joining us if not. Awesome. Okay, good. Well, we've got Michael here as well, and so Michael's going to be helping us with this today. And we hope to do that. We're going to have him doing some of these with us as we do. He's got a lot to add, I think, in a lot of the different topics that we'll be talking about. And that's going to be the focus today. Is we're going to end up talking about many different aspects here of selling. But things I think that will be useful for all the coaching members specifically.
Yeah, I think so.
Guys, to be honest with you, that is actually not. Once again, I totally had that there, and it was from our previous week, and I forgot to fill it out. And so I'm going to skip over the announcements because I don't really have anything to announce necessarily. But for this week's success story, actually, I wanted to do a spotlight on Jim and Drew. And I moved that thing up there a little bit too high. Oops, let me back up one. Just because really what they've done is amazing, and they continue to do incredible things. But just as a whole, though, if you're looking to get an idea of what you can do, these guys have done it, and it's not like anything they've done is really anything crazy. Fairly simple stuff that they've done. They've just stuck to it, and they've continued to acquire property and submit offers. And at the end of the day, they've acquired a lot of property and done a lot in sales.
Yeah, I mean they've done really great. And like Shade said, they're continually working the business. Kind of the same thing as Vance. We have several students that are taking it to the next level where they are constantly building their portfolios, constantly buying new properties, doing deals, and building this business really to where the sky's the limit.
Yeah, in fact, let me just, the writing's kind of small, so let me just read it real quick for the people if you're looking and you can't really tell. It just says, Drew and I have also purchased 2 over-the-counter properties in Pennsylvania last week. It is quite a long wait of 9 to 12 months to receive the deeds, but we plan to put more properties in the pipeline, and time does pass quickly. We've now purchased real estate valued at about $293,000 for only $17,000. This would not have been possible without your help and assistance. We really appreciate all that you guys have done for us. But what I wanted to kind of focus on was even just on the 7 properties that they that they bought and sold. What's really interesting about it is they bought and sold 7 properties, which didn't cost them, more than about $7,000, and they were able to sell them, for about $42,000. But it was also interesting how that broke down.
Yeah, well, in looking at those numbers, 7 properties for $7,800, they paid about $1,100 a property on average, and selling for a 42,000% return, that's a return of over 500%. And it looks like they're also generating monthly income as well.
Yeah, in fact, I think that the way that it broke down was about, I think it was close to 18,000 or so, was money that they brought in, as cash deals. And then seller financing, though, is something that they love and that they're really into. They had some comments about seller financing and not realizing just how much demand there was there. And just off of the 7 deals they did there, it's generating about $840 a month, in these notes. So yeah, it was like 18,000 was cash, and the rest of it is done through seller financing, which is an awesome way to create monthly revenue, and you still actually get to kind of hang on to the property as well in a way.
Yeah, well, and looking at it, in generating $840 a month, that's as much as a rental property.
Yeah.
Where they've only spent $7,800, plus they've got the cash up front, plus they're bringing in this additional money. Where I bet most of these, in fact, I'll almost guarantee that they're seller financing land. So you're not worrying about faucets. You're not having to worry about all of the headaches that you're going to have if you're doing maybe a structured property and doing these seller financing land deals, because there's nothing like that you need to worry about.
You know what's amazing about this is that they basically earn a 10% return on their money, even though they've already been paid back on it. They earn another 10% return on it every single month.
Yeah, that's true.
That is, that's
spent 7,800 making 840. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's really impressive, and again, not outside of what any of you can do, and can also be involved with. They're doing it in lots of different states now, and I think it's just their consistency is really what it's been all about. They've been willing to put in the work. In fact, Michael, Michael, you've worked with them.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys were outstanding students. And right from the beginning, I could tell, they weren't afraid to go ahead and go out there and get some properties as quickly as they could. And they just hit the ground running and really just never stopped. They paid attention, they really worked hard, and I could tell that they truly wanted to learn the business. And I mean, it definitely shows. I mean, these guys just absolutely crushed it. I mean, it's amazing to see that they're still doing it. We have some students that, they'll learn the business and they'll flip a few properties and then they might move on to something else. And then we have some students that are, really want to make this something that's incredible for them. And that's what Jim and Drew have definitely done. Amazing students. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, and by the way, I think everybody should be able to hear us right now. Just want to make sure. We had one person that said that they couldn't hear. I'm wondering if we had not started or something, but I think that for most everybody, if you guys can just do us a favor, go down in the comments and just let us know if everything, if you can hear us all right. And that way I don't get paranoid here that somehow we're not broadcasting. I think we'd be getting more complaints if it was more.
I think so too.
So anyhow, thank you guys so much. Awesome. Okay, well, good. Well, let's dive right into the topic tonight, because really part of what we want to be able to do is talk a lot with Michael here in the topic we're going to cover tonight, so that we can bounce around different ideas and really, I think, help you guys understand different things that can help you sell property faster, can help you be successful faster, make more money on your properties. So really, like we always tell you, you can split your business into two parts, the buying side of your business and the selling side of it, and they're both equally important in order to be successful. You can't just do one or the other.
Yeah, you got to do number one before you can even do number two, and even when you get done
you can't
selling,
stop doing one or the other, or else the other one becomes a problem. They kind of have to be done hand in hand, in order to keep properties coming in and to continue to be profitable. But let's focus here for just a second on the process that we go through after a deed has been received, which that can take a while, but it also marks the time frame when we can begin selling a property.
Yeah.
And so from the time that we buy the property until the time that we receive the deed, we can't really do much in terms of trying to list it or anything, because we don't have the deed yet. We don't really have the ability to sell it yet.
No, the one thing we can do though is start collecting all of the information, to get ready for
it. Because all the information is going to be readily available during the sale or after the sale, shortly after, but it's not going to be available maybe forever. And so it's a good thing to grab it and to get it organized.
Exactly. If I could just jump in really quickly, yes. And I wanted to say to all of my students, please, as soon as you purchase a property, be sure to record all of the information into your Google Slides file, as far as all of the records and the picture of the highlighted parcel, and all that information is great to get up front, because as soon as they approve your purchase, then they're going to take all that stuff down, and having to track it down after the fact and try to get it afterwards can be we can still get it, but it's a little bit more of a pain. It takes a little bit longer. So please, as soon as you actually do get actually in the beginning we should be recording these anyways, but please, I have so many students that will purchase properties and sometimes not tell me, and then we don't have it in their coaching file, and then it becomes a little bit more of a challenge after the fact to track all that stuff down.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's something that sometimes you learn the hard way, if you don't have all that information gathered, before a sale, or if you don't have it saved in the right spot, because it will go missing.
Well, and it makes it easier for all of us because, not only do me and Shay come and check, that's how we're getting these success stories, and we're looking and we go through and check your portfolios, and that's really how we get an idea of where you're at, is by going through and looking at your portfolio. So as you're updating those, adding notes, in addition to that, even your guys' hotline coach, Ann, that also helps her. So if you guys have a question, if Michael or Dustin is out, doing a real estate deal, or on the phone with another coaching student, that way we can all kind of stay up to date on the same, and have the same information.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, in fact, yeah, the more up to date it is, the easier it will be for everybody to kind of be on the same page, and to be able to help you. Now, this process here, we're talking about the general process after we receive a deed is, we create our advertisement or our listings, and then we're going to send out neighbor letters. Then we're gonna start posting all of our listings. But let's focus on the very first part of this, which is, creating property listings. And let's talk about some of the things that we do as we're creating the listings. We already mentioned here gathering all of the information, which is really something that starts when you're going through the process of researching it, to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. You should be, adding screenshots or information on the property into your portfolio in your interested property section, with any of this kind of information. So hopefully when you do buy it, you've at least already got a jump start on having all of that the information available to you.
Yeah.
Right. If I could jump in here really quick, and it's great to copy all that stuff. Some people like to use Excel spreadsheets, and that's great. But it's really great to also copy that information into your Google Slides so that we'll have it, so we can kind of see the ones that you're looking at. And then if you don't end up buying that property, you can always just erase that slide. But it just makes things so much easier when we actually go to list the properties.
Yeah, it does. It will save a ton of time. Also something is we're doing that and gathering the information. When we go to create the property listing, one of the things that we want to begin thinking about, and that has to begin early, is trying to create professional looking listings, which means that it's not going to look like something that was just thrown up, but something that looks like there was time and effort put into it. And that oftentimes means a lot of images. Even if you don't have street side images of the property, images don't have to be that. They can be information as well. But the difference being, when you see an ad that has a lot of images uploaded, and has also a fairly extensive overview written about it, you can tell more time is put into it, and you automatically have more confidence in the seller.
Yeah. Well, and getting photos that have to do with the area as well can be helpful. In fact, even today, as we're adding new listings, as we're buying property and selling them, we're going and looking at the ads that are for sale in the area, just to get an idea of what they are highlighting within the area. Even though we've been doing this for, been in real estate now for 20 years, we're still going there and looking at the ads, seeing what, look, they're highlighting this park, this must be an important area, or, these different things, amenities within the city. And we'll even add photos, maps, anything like that to highlight the listing and make it look that much better.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to jump in here and add is, with a lot of my coaching students that had great properties, but it seemed like the properties weren't moving for a long time, and then they got back in touch with me and said, hey, it's been a little while, Michael, and these properties haven't moved. I've always kind of noticed that when I looked at their listings, I can see that they definitely tried, but there were still some mistakes and things that we had to correct. And then suddenly, once we got those corrected, and this has been with many of my students, once we got a few things corrected and made a few adjustments, suddenly the properties moved rather quickly. So, you want to, like they were saying, you want to have as many good pictures as you possibly can. Having the picture of the highlighted parcel that you can get off of the GIS map will at least allow the buyer to see where the property boundaries are, so they can at least get an idea in their head of what the property entails. And then also, we can get great screenshots off of Google Maps a lot of times, but sometimes there may not be street side imaging available. In that case, it doesn't hurt to throw up an ad on Craigslist or something like that and hire someone for, $10 or $20 to go by there, like a local, and just snap a few quick photos. Almost everybody these days has a smartphone, and you can get some rather inexpensive photos, and it'll help you move your property that much quicker. And then also, another thing I wanted to add here as well is you want to make sure that, there's no typos in your little paragraph that you write at the top. You want to make sure that there's no major mistakes or grammatical errors to the best of your ability, and just make sure that your little paragraph at the top or your description of the property at least makes sense. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece or this really long thing. We actually kind of want to keep those short and sweet, because when people are actually reading your listing, most of the time they don't want to read this really long paragraph. They just want a brief description. Hey, this property is tucked in a nice, quiet, peaceful neighborhood. It's the perfect place to build your dream home. Things like that. Just really basic descriptions. It's nice and flat. The grass is nice. Whatever you want to put there, you can just kind of ad lib. But essentially, if we can just keep it nice and simple, but make sure that it makes sense, that can make a huge difference. And then the other major mistake that I see a lot of my students making is, they won't have all of the pertinent information that we need to have listed on the listing. Like, you need to have the parcel number, the legal description, the size of the parcel, any other information. You want to have the amount of the yearly property taxes, so people can see how much it's going to cost them in property taxes per year. All of that information is there so that that'll save you from having to answer a lot of questions for the buyer later, and it'll also make it look more professional. But honestly, if the listing looks really sloppy and it just looks like you kind of, there's a lot of mistakes in it, then that makes people question. You got to remember, people are kind of questioning us to begin with, our legitimacy, just because we're wholesaling these properties to begin with. So we want to really put up a nice professional looking listing. It doesn't have to be fantastic, but it definitely does need to be professional.
Yeah. In fact, I think you bring up a really good point too, in the difference between selling your property and not selling it a lot of times is not as big of a difference as you might think it is. When it feels like you're just getting no interest or something on your properties, it is usually a couple of key tweaks, changes, that we can adjust to things that will suddenly make it more appealing and will drive more traffic to it. It's amazing how much little changes can affect your list.
Yeah, well, and like Michael talked about, where we're having a paragraph, a smaller kind of where we're talking about the area, and then really below that, a lot of times we'll almost do a bullet point where we have the address, the assessed, maybe the assessed value depending on the area, but the property taxes, the size, the zoning, all of that information kind of in a almost bullet point below it, so somebody can look at it and say, okay, here is all the basic information on the property. And then also one thing we'll add is, we'll explain why we're selling property for a discount. So I buy property through government auctions and wholesale them to local property owners or whatever it is, so that the person has an idea. Okay, why is this person asking $4,000 for this property when all the other properties are each 10?
Yeah, that's a good point too. If you don't explain exactly why your property is cheaper, and if you don't explain some of that, then I think it does cause people to be suspicious. But it also, is why we sell it the way we sell it and how we do it. That's all relevant, and it's important for them to know that as well, I think.
Yeah.
Now, we also always try to include images, maps, and like we were saying though, the better your listings look, I think the less likely you're going to be to attract a lot of fearful buyers. The people that would love to buy from you, but they just can't overcome their fear to do so. I think you'll get a lot less of that, yeah, with the better your listings become.
Yeah, well, and Michael does bring up one good point as well when it comes to getting on-site evaluations, or getting on-site photos. If you could get it for 25 or 30 bucks, and it adds a lot to that listing, gives you an idea more about the property. Especially if you can't get those street side views, then it could definitely be worth it, to spend 20, 30 bucks, get somebody to go out there, take some photos of the property, and then, be able to have those photos.
Yeah, especially if you've acquired a couple pieces of land in the same area.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to add is, with a lot of my students that I've worked with, and they're like, well, Michael, my property's just not selling. I'm not sure why. They're like, well, should I drop the price on this? And like we've been discussing, just making sure that all of the fine points and everything is set up properly on the listing is so important. Just making sure everything looks professional. We want to have all of the information there to where when the buyer calls us, they have very few questions, and we can start talking more about getting them closed, or the terms of seller financing, or that sort of thing, instead of answering other types of questions. And so the more information that we can provide them in the listing, the better.
In fact, right along those same lines, I think it'll be better if we kind of skip up to here, because Michael brings up a really good point. And that is, what we do after a person or somebody responds. If we have somebody that's interested in the property and they respond to our listing, because, that's when a lot of students panic, for some reason,
Yeah, in fact, this is probably where more often than not, if people are getting calls and they're not selling the property, they're losing the sale in this section.
Yeah, it's possible to lose the sale in this part,
really,
definitely.
Really, it's probably something that we've got to train more in the future, even just because, that initial call, that initial way you handle the sale, the negotiating terms, automatically you can turn somebody off, very easily by just a few things.
Yeah, saying the wrong things, or handling things the wrong way, you can definitely kill a sale. That has every chance of happening. So with that in mind, when you do have somebody that contacts you or responds to your listing, now that could be a neighbor, or it could be somebody that just sees a classified listing, whatever that is, when they make that decision to reach out and contact you, it's a big deal for us, because basically it's everything that we're working towards here is to find these eligible, potential buyers with interest. I mean, this is a hot lead, really. And this is the kind of lead that companies spend tons of money to try to create.
Well, and the very first thing we need to do is respond to them as quickly as possible. And the reason is potential buyer may call more than just your lot. They may call several lots. They may call lots over, over a couple of days, that and so the sooner that you respond to them, the fresher that property is going to be in their mind. If you call them back 2 days and they've looked through 30 properties and have made 6 or 7 calls during that time, it's going to be hard to bring up the emotion, or it'll be at least more difficult the longer you wait.
Yeah, it is so much about trying to capture that when they are, when they're chomping at the bit. Yeah, exactly. When they do remember it. Yeah, it's true that, if you go to contact them after, there is a good chance they're not going to know what you are talking about, especially if it's been anything more than a short bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's a neighbor, they're gonna, they got a neighbor letter, they're gonna probably know which one. But like Shade said, there's gonna be investors, people that are looking for property, that are going through and could be making several calls or looking at a lot of property. So the sooner you contact them, the higher chance you have of getting the sale. And so even if you have butterflies, even if you're nervous about it, give them a call back as soon as you can. If not, be able to take the call live.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention here as well, hopefully we've answered most of their questions in the ad. And then whatever questions that they have, we want to kind of wrap them up as quickly as we can. And I don't go into too much explanation most of the time. I try to just get right to the point and kind of move towards getting them closed. And then, once we've got them to the point where they have no other questions, most people don't, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but we need to know what to say. If the buyer says, yes, I'm ready to buy, then we need to know exactly what to say. And if you kind of fumble and flounder around and you don't, act like you've never done it before, or you don't know exactly how to do it, then that's going to also kind of spook them a little bit. And so immediately right there, we kind of need to at least have in our head, what the steps are. And so basically what I'll explain to them is, okay, if you're ready to go ahead and purchase, whether it be a full lump sum payment or whether it be with seller financing, I'll just simply explain to them, okay, perfect. If you're ready to move forward, what I'll go ahead and do is draft up a very basic agreement that's very easy to understand. And then I'll go ahead and send it to you through, and I use hellosign.com because it's free to use. And for a digital signature, which is legally binding, once we've both signed the agreement, that way we have something in writing, then what I'll go ahead and do is get your payment. And you can go ahead and pay with check, money order. If they want to pay through PayPal, I'll essentially accept any form of legitimate payment. If they're starting to get skeptical and say, well, I'm afraid you're going to run off with my money and I don't know if I trust you, or they start going down that road, then what I'll always tell them is, hey, if you want to go ahead, you can go ahead and send a personal check, and I won't be able to just cash that. I'll have to actually deposit that into my account, and it'll be definitely traceable through the banks. And that'll usually put them at rest. If they still say, well, I'm still skeptical, if you're trying to save the sale, you might say something like, well, you can check with the county circuit clerk and clearly see that the deed is recorded into my name. If they're still not happy with that, then we can finally, possibly look at, sending them a copy of the deed that proves that we have it in our name. Just be sure to cover up on the deed if it does show how much you paid for it, because they're not going to be very happy if they see that you got it for 10% of what you're selling it to them for, of course. And so from there, after we've, gotten them, okay, we've gotten them to digitally signed. Basically, I'll just explain it to them this way. Once we both sign the agreement, I've received your payment and your payment clears, then I'll just simply tell them I'll mail off all of the closing paperwork to the county clerk. And then that generally takes them about 1 to 2 business days to transfer the deed into your name. And then from there, we can have it mailed to your residence, or I can arrange to have you pick it up at the courthouse.
Yeah.
So we just need to know, exactly how to answer that question. You don't want to say, well, I'll have to get back to you or anything like that. We want to be able to go ahead and close that as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and one thing, if somebody is having a serious issue about it, it's possible to have a local attorney handle that from them, and you can even bring that up to you. Well, we could have a local attorney handle it. He'll give me the money. He'll transfer the deed, but it's going to cost $1,500, and, do you want to spend an extra $1,500 or $2,000 in the price of the property, to have an attorney do it? I wouldn't bring that up until the very end, but that is possible. If they really want, let's say we're selling a $6,000 property and they really want to buy it, but they're afraid of us, you could find a local attorney there that could go ahead and do the deed work for you and, handle the agreement, help them sell safe, but that's going to come out of their end, not our end, and so, if you want to pay that cost, then we can look into that option if you have a serious buyer.
Yeah. Also, I think Dan might have had a question for you, Michael, about whether you were referring to quitclaim deeds. I'm sure you probably were referring to the quitclaim deed because that's the primary one that we transfer.
You're talking about wholesale.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's with wholesaling. So if we have a warranty deed, then we're probably going to be going through a law firm or a title company or something like that. So it'd be a different story. But when we're wholesaling, yes, we're going to be transferring all of the paperwork ourselves.
Yeah. Now, when we have somebody that contacts us, and we're suddenly put in this position of needing to generate sales here for our business, basically what our job is at that point is to come up with arrangements, that the buyer can agree to. And, this can be this could be financial arrangements or payment terms. The idea is essentially to figure out what is holding that, that buyer back from moving forward. In some cases, you can just move right forward with, let's figure out payment arrangements. Moving right into payment arrangements is kind of an easy way to close somebody on, on a transaction.
Yeah. Well, and also, when you'll still have people that are looking for get the property or for cheaper than you're listing it. And you may have some workable room, you may not have workable room. If you've already dropped it down to your lowest price and you're not going to accept less than that, then, you just go ahead and tell them, that I'm not going to accept less than this. But usually if the person's calling you, they're calling you because the price is already low.
Yeah, like they've already, they've already kind of agreed to the price. That's kind of why that's why they're interested in, in the first place. A lot of times their concerns about buying or something else related to that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we have to figure out too, as we're talking with them, is we have to figure out what that primary concern is, and then we have to figure out the best way to resolve it. So, in other words, what might seem like a concern with the price of something could very easily really be a concern about it being affordable, or about the individual's ability to purchase it, because it may not, it's not the price that they so much care about as it is about their ability to pay for it.
Yeah, well, and when we're talking about wholesale versus, retail, or going through the quiet title process, these properties we're selling as is.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to sell them using quick claim deeds, just as is, unless the value of the property, is pretty good and it, merits taking the property through quiet title. Charles is asking if an escrow company, can be an option. I think if you're willing to pay for it, sure.
Yeah, it's a possibility. Sometimes escrow companies are primarily working with warranty deeds. So with a quick claim deed, they probably could do it. It may not be something that they're normally do. I think you could probably do it cheap, and you might be able to get an attorney to do it for $300 or $400. Do the deed and handle it for you. But your regular escrow company is not going to be. It's familiar with them. They may or may not do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I also think that Michael brought up some really good points in that. You can have people that contact you and are essentially ready to buy, and you can kind of unwrap your own sale by not being prepared on some of these things. And so the best thing to do is get a lot of this stuff set up ahead of time, know what your options are. But really, I think it's about trying to resolve the concern for the individual, because they wouldn't contact you if they weren't ready to buy, at least in most cases. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. They may need to have, they need to see that it's possible and how it can be done.
Yeah, well, and there's one other thing is that you can add to your listing, and that you're probably going to want to have, if we're talking about some type of building lot, is what are the building restrictions within the area?
Yeah.
Property owners call and ask that all the time. In fact, I think that it's good to do it on every single property you purchase. Contact the city, find out what the building restrictions are, what size of home you can build, what type, all of that kind of information, because that's going to be a question if somebody is buying the property to build on it.
Yeah, in fact, I know, Michael, this is something I know that you've dealt with, plenty of times, in terms of trying to figure out what properties are eligible for, what code allows and what it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. What I will do, because you get a lot of people and they'll say, hey, can I put a trailer on this property? Can I put a manufactured home here? Or, they'll hit you with a question like, what size home or things like that. And if you don't know it right off the top of your head, I'll say, I don't know off the top of my head, but we can certainly call the city and find out. And by the way, usually the correct department that we're going to want to call is the City Planning and Zoning Department. It's usually called like Planning and Zoning, or it'll be something similar to that. But if you call the city, essentially, if you ask for that department, they can usually refer you to the right people. And then we can ask them a lot of questions and get a lot more information. And then we can also, if we don't end up selling it to that person, we can add that information into our listing, and then have it that much easier to sell next time.
Yeah, in fact, I actually am starting to think it's worth it to call on every property you're going to buy. You know, it's a 5 or 10 minute phone call, and there's a chance that you could buy a property in an area that looks like it's a building lot. Everything should be a building lot with it. It looks similar to the lots. It's decent size. Well, something's happened within that city the last 2 years, and they changed the law, and you need to have a bigger lot now than you did 3 years ago to build within that area. And so I just think it's worth it, that quick call to figure it out. And also it can also tell you, maybe there's something in there that'll help you decide, hey, I want to spend a little extra, or I want this property more. Maybe it does allow mobile homes, and that you could buy a mobile home and create a single family home to sell, or whatever like that. There may be insight that helps even in the buying process.
Yeah, or you can even have some properties there. Michael, what were they testing in the soil on that one property of yours? They kept doing it was a perk test. Perk test is something that they do on properties that oftentimes gets done at some point.
Yeah, on a particular property that I bought one time, it was the strangest thing. There was a house on the left of it and a house on the right of it, and it was a nice. So I figured, just like normal, it's going to have access to some form of utilities, and otherwise, if they had to put septic tanks there, this person right over here to the left and right over here to the right were able to do it, so it shouldn't be an issue. Well, what I found out by calling them is they had changed the restrictions. They had grandfathered in all of the other people with a less strict perk test, and they had changed the laws over time, essentially. And so now you had to pass a much stricter perk test. And so now my property suddenly wouldn't pass the perk test, and so I wasn't able to get a septic tank put in. So it was kind of a predicament. I was kind of shocked by it, to be honest with you, because besides that, it was a perfectly usable piece of land, and it was just the silliest thing that the county wouldn't, or the city, I guess it was, wouldn't let me use that land for purposes and put a house there that they can then charge more property taxes on. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I was able to sell the property to one of the neighbors, and I still made a great profit off of it. But nonetheless, you can run into those things from time to time. So we always want to. It's a great idea to go ahead and give them a call and just start picking their brain and ask them that information. And not only that, like they were saying earlier, they may have had one standard lot size that was a buildable size at one point in time, and then suddenly they changed the law or something like that, and suddenly they deem your property to be an unbuildable size or something like that. Or if you have a property that's questionable or it has an odd shape and you're just wondering about it, it's a good idea to just pick up the phone and pick their brain. You can find out a lot of information.
Yeah, in fact, one thing that was kind of interesting about that property I remember now was that the county was already fairly familiar with the perk test issue with the property when you contacted them.
Yeah, exactly. So they already have that information, but then they had sold it at the sale anyways, and then I went ahead and bought it. I didn't pay very much for it. But yeah, they were already familiar with it. I guess the last person that had it had let it go just for that very reason, because he had purchased it. He paid a lot more for it from what it looked like from the records than I did. He paid considerably more, and then was very frustrated to find out that they had changed the laws. And essentially a perk test is where they dig down and they see how long it takes water to absorb into the ground. It's called a perk test. And then that determines, how fit the ground or the area is there to put in a septic tank. And so before they didn't,
like rural type property.
Yeah, it was a pretty rural property.
It's in city, then it's going to have city sewer, cities, stuff, water, stuff like that. But if it's a more rural property,
you got to dig a basement or a
yeah, well, even a septic tank.
Yeah,
you're gonna
basement or a septic tank. Anything you got to dig for, you're going to have a perk test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time with our other lots, like they were saying, you can just tie into all the city utilities. And 99 times out of 100, as long as you're near other residences that have all the utilities, you should be able to tie into all of the city utilities as well. And if there's ever any question, like if you have a property that's way off in the middle of nowhere by itself, and it's zoned residential, then you definitely want to give them a call and make sure that those utilities are available. Or if there's ever any question in my mind that they might not be for some reason, then I'll just go ahead and pick up the phone and call them as well.
Now, once we're able to come to terms, once, let's say, we're able to determine, we can get the buyer to agree to either, a set price on it and the payment methods, or we agree to provide some kind of seller financing. From that point, the next thing we need to do is get our paperwork going, which is, we need to have, we need to get our sales agreement or sales contract signed. If we're just, selling it, if we're offering, the financing, then we need to get that seller financing contract signed as well, using one of the online providers. And this can be somewhere, I think, that also, can maybe hang up some new people, when you're trying to figure out what you're doing here and you're still trying to get your agreements and things like that put together. I think, it can be a source of concern, because we've seen, before with different coaching students. And so, for instance, I know one of the questions we get is, the buyer already has a contract, and really that's, when we are doing this, as the seller, we're kind of the ones that are in charge and they're calling the shots.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to stuff like the agreements, it's stuff based on what we determine and what we decide. So we always want to use our contract, and generally we're going to use the same one for a lot of our transactions.
Yeah, exactly. I use a very standard contract. I use it in all the properties I buy and sell. You don't want to give the appearance, even if it is your first rodeo, you want to act like you're a pro, even if it's just, faking it through the first one, saying, well, this is actually the contract I use. It works good. I know that it's going to go through with the county. Everything's, good on it. I don't want to send in the deed and get it back, so I use my contract.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to jump in here and add really quick is never let the buyer draft the agreement. I've had a few of them, they're like, well, I'm in real estate as well, or I know what I'm doing, I can draft the contract. And then I've had them, have these really long, hard to read contracts sometimes, and you got to go through it with a fine tooth comb. And I've had them try to sneak, stuff in there that's not going to be in my best interest and things like that. And I always just let them know, hey, I'm the one that owns the property. I'm the one that's going to draft the agreement. I'm going to draft something that's very basic, right to the point, that we can both, understand. That you're not going to have an attorney to read over with, but at the same time, I'm going to be the one to draft the agreement. And also, one thing I wanted to add while I'm thinking about it really quick here is, once you've got the buyer on the phone and they said, okay, let's move forward, before you hang up with them, get their full name and the spelling. If they're going to have their wife's name on the deed, get her name and the spelling, get their address right then and there. If you don't have, you should have their phone number, but make sure you get their email address so that we have everything ready to move forward and go ahead and start drafting the contract right away. Because a lot of people will forget to get that information from them. Then they end up having to turn around and try to call them back. And then at that point, the buyer may be busy or off doing something else. So we want to get that information like a pro right at the beginning. That way we can jump in here and start drafting this contract right away.
Yeah. Well, what?
It's a really good point. In fact, if you forget that stuff, going back, time is ultimately always going to be your most valuable resource. And so, a lot of the things that you're going to do are going to be to avoid wasting time. And so gathering all that stuff in the first instance here is going to be a great way to not waste time. Dealing with your own contracts, like Michael said, with the, somebody else providing the agreements and stuff, all of it's just time consuming. We want to take people through a simple process there with a simple contract and things that are not going to take.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to mention is as soon as they say they're ready to move forward, we want to get the contract drafted and sent to them as quickly as possible. The more time that they have to sit around and think about it, if we could let a few days pass, and the next thing you know, my car broke down, I've got to spend money on this, or something came up and or I changed my mind. As soon as we're not trying to rush them into anything, and we're going to send them the agreement and let them think it over. But also we want to strike while the iron is hot. and not let it drag out for several days before we get them the contract. As soon as somebody tells me, hey, I'm ready to move forward, boy, their head spins as fast because I get it to them lightning fast.
Yeah, and one thing as well, when it comes to doing these kind of deals, is don't be afraid to walk away, because there might be some buyers out there that are pretend buyers, or what we call strokers, where they're just, they're just kicking the tires, tire kickers. They're just, they're really not ever going to buy. And so you'll come across some of those that time. And if somebody's not going to, go ahead and pull the trigger, do the deal, then just walk away. Also, if they're lowballing you, prices, say, I'm not going to give the property away. I've already listed it for the lowest possible price. If you're interested, I'll sell it to you at that price. And also one thing to add with, when we're selling these properties, we're also not charging them a lot of times the cost in doing the deed or anything like that. We're transferring the deed, it's usually 30, whatever the cost is to do the deed and stuff, where, it's actually a savings to them, because if not, that would cost hundreds and even thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Francesca's actually got a good question, and she's asking, what if the buyer doesn't uphold the contract? And I think it kind of goes into kind of the purpose behind the contract and why we have it if the buyer were to not uphold it. And part of it's about protecting ourselves, I think, but part of it is I think is also just about the clarity of the deal. In other words, they could break the agreement and maybe legally they might be liable to us, but if it's something that's going to require much time, we're probably going to walk away.
Yeah, well, and it also kind of depends on what kind of deal we're talking about. I mean, if they signed the contract but then never sent in the money.
Yeah, like if that kind of thing happens, we just don't do anything.
Yeah, because essentially they're just, a tire kicker, but if it's one where we have our seller financing, we've already made that in the agreement up front, been up front to them both verbally and through the contract, saying, this is going to pay for this property, but if you walk away, it is what it is.
Yeah, you're not going to retain your interest in the property. If you walk away from it, you're going to.
And one thing that's a little bit different about this is we're talking about wholesaling land. So, if we're talking about a home or larger properties, a lot of times there's going to be a deposit involved, or some type of money order. You can do that in these cases, but usually we're just trying to do the deal where they sign the contract. We're not worrying about doing any type of earnest money or deposit. We're just doing a simple contract where they agree to buy the property at the price, and once they've submitted payment, then we go ahead and submit the deed in their name. So it's a little bit different than if you were selling a home or something like that.
Yeah.
Where there's a earnest money or deposits or something along those lines.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, if you're doing a seller financing deal, when I get their down payment, I try to make their down payment be as much as I paid for the property in full. So right there in the first payment, I've already got all of my money back, and then everything that maybe even then some if I get a little bit more out of the first down payment. And then every payment on top of that is just, perfect, free and clear residual income coming in. And so if they back out of the deal, it says clearly in the contract that, we're going to give them a notice period if they're late on a payment or something. And then if they, we can charge them a late fee during that period if we want to, or you can decide not to. A lot of times I won't. I'll just say, hey, you're late. Please pay as quickly as possible. And then once they go past the notice period, if they still don't pay, then it clearly states that they forfeit any and all payments that they've made so far. And plus they lose all rights to the property. So it spells it out pretty clear for them. I've had a couple of people that have walked away. I think one of the ladies unfortunately lost her job. I tried to stick with her I gave her months and months and months to pick up the payments again. But it's just the way, it's just doing business. We're not trying to get over on people, but at the same time, they understand what the agreement is. And also, we're not usually charging them any interest or anything like that. So all of their money's going towards paying off the principal amount. So we're really giving them a very fair deal, and we're wholesaling it to them at amazing prices usually.
Yeah. The prices themselves, are really good too. So there are tons of reasons for them, to complete the transaction, when you offer seller financing, and hopefully all those things like no interest and being flexible with them and working with them, allows you to save, some of the deals, with people that are workable. But also, like Michael's saying, it is just business, and there are going to be people that are not workable, and that just make the choice to walk away.
Yeah, well, and when it comes to seller finance, not all of our students, a lot of them do it with 0% interest. You don't have to. In fact, most people don't. Part of the reason we do is because we feel like we're already making so much profit out of it. And also, we want to give them every opportunity to get the property. And so if we're giving them 0% interest and 100% of that is going to pay down their principal, and they've already given us money up front, so they know that they've already, invested that much into the property, then they're more likely to gonna pay it off. I mean, there's businesses out there that rely on doing this type of seller financing and having people never get their property. They do charge higher interest, they do lower down payments, and then they just, get the money, and then, for 6 months, and then the person quits paying, and they do 2 or 3 year loans. We try to get the interest free where they're getting it paid within 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, well, and enable them to buy a property they wouldn't normally, be able to acquire otherwise.
Yeah, well, and they know that you're being fair with them. You're being more than fair,
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
And that's exactly, we're making so much off of the deal that charging interest, you can certainly do it, and you can do it however you want to make the terms, but to me, I try to be as fair as possible, and it's also going to help you close the deal a little bit easier.
Yeah. Now, once we do have a property sold, once we have the contract signed, then what exactly do we do after that? And I've got some of the steps listed here, but this is where we are going to go about collecting payment and the buyer information. These are some important steps, that you take immediately after, the agreement and the signing of the agreements. And this is where you can save yourself some time and get some stuff done.
Yeah, well, and there's some states that, our students have sold a lot of property within that state, Arkansas, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, some of these different states where they purchase property and there's already kind of a system in place. But one thing you're going to need to do, especially if you're looking in a new area and don't already have an idea of how it's done, is find out what type of local protocols they're going to have. In some areas, they require you to send in a stamped envelope if they're going to send back the deed, if they're going to send the deed to the new property owner.
You're gonna have to send in payments probably also for the pages they print. They're gonna have county specific or area specific procedures for deed transfers.
Yeah, well, and that's part, this cost that's involved is usually going to be minimal, if we're looking at these type of properties, but we want to figure that out beforehand, or at least have an idea, especially if they have, usually the tax stamps and stuff like that are very, very cheap. But if they did have some type of high one, like there's certain places in Pennsylvania that do, they have some type of high sales transfer tax, you're going to want to know about that when you're selling the property, because there's going to be some type of tax that's paid to, I can't remember exactly, it was the state.
To the state?
I think it was the city, some type of city types, but it could be state.
No,
I know it's based on the city, like the state, the county or areas, though.
Yeah. The way that each county handles the recording of deeds is similar in a lot of ways, but is kind of unique too. And the only way you can really figure it out, at least from what we've seen instructions online, but you almost have to call the county.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in here because I was actually speaking with one of my students, David Barnes. In fact, I think he asked a question earlier. We were actually talking about this specific thing, and it's such a good idea to go ahead and pick up the phone and call the county clerk Sometimes it's the circuit clerk, sometimes it's the clerk of the court, sometimes it's the recorder's office, land records. They can have different names, but we want to find out who actually records the deeds and give them a call and just make sure we're following all of the protocol, everything step by step. And because they're gonna, like we were talking about, they may have certain things that we need to add. Like they may say, well, it needs to be sent to room 101, attention so and so. We also want to make sure that we make the checkout payable for the recording the deed to the proper person, and things like that, and just make sure that we're doing everything properly so that we wouldn't have to do it again later. And that can really save you a lot of time and money. And like we were talking, Stephen and Jay were mentioning, you definitely want to find out how much all of these fees are going to be, because in most cases, it's around 30, 40 bucks. And then I usually don't charge the buyer that. I'll just, write it off my taxes essentially. But you can charge the buyer, and most people are used to paying closing costs. So if it's something you want to pass on to the buyer, you can go ahead and do it. In fact, in our terms and conditions at the bottom, it says there may be a low documentation fee for recording the deed. So we can pass it on to them if we want to.
In fact, that's an easy way to get a little extra money out of your property, especially if you're charging minimal, $100, $200. People, if they see $100 or $200 documentation fee, in some ways,
They wouldn't think anything of it.
in some ways it adds a little bit more legitimacy to it, and and so.
Yeah, it's normal for them to see it.
Yeah,
And
in fact,
so if
we
they
used
don't,
to do
it's
that
almost
on
unusual.
all of the properties. We've kind of quit doing that lately, but we had done that, as a standard practice, even as like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. Now we're pretty much out of time with the weekly webinar, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But we'll get the recording out there for everybody to listen to. I just want to thank Michael for joining us here for the coaches call tonight. And if any of you guys need any help, feel free to contact us, and we'll be sure to help.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
See ya.